one of the, at least it looks like few so far, advantages of getting old is now it's okay to look back. And so let me post the following disclaimer. At best, what I have to say is an add-on. If you want to know what's happening on, talk to Randy Cohn, talk to Stan Yoshinobu, Michelle Smith, I heard talk about his stuff the other day, and a couple of years ago, this slide was made before yesterday, Michelle. Carol Schumacher, Michael Starbird. It's happening other places now. But what I'm going to talk about are some things that I pick out when I look back on the workshops I've done over the past 40 years. So here's the information base that I'm pulling from. I worked a couple of Eisenhower grants, one of them with Bath County, Highland County, Virginia K through 8 teachers, Shenandoah Valley secondary teachers, through James Madison in service to Shenandoah Valley teachers, Winchester City Schools K through 8, Luray City Schools, worked with Randy recently with Southside Virginia, and I've had a chance on occasion to follow up with the many students who have passed through the first 2 semesters and then 3-semester math for K through 8 that the mathematics department offers in support of the IDLS degree at James Madison University. So that's the experience base that I'm looking back at for in-service teachers. For peers, common objective seminars at James Madison University, presentations on teaching in which there was time for the audience to get involved, and working with Stan in the More Method workshops that he initiated through EAF. It's been, geez, what, 8 or 9 years ago now, I guess. But the first 3 of those I actually worked with Stan on before he started looking for real competence. Now, this talk, as I indicated, is meant to be retrospective. You know, these things happened. I did them. I tried to learn from them when I did them the next time. And now I'm going to share with you what some of the things that I gleaned from them by describing context, and then at the end try to draw at least some lesson. So I've picked, just so that I have something particular to work with, one thing that talks about each type of cohort. So one of the first workshops that I worked was with secondary teachers in the Shenandoah Valley who had either taught calculus or were going to teach calculus. It was funded through an Eisenhower grant. Bill Smith recruited me when he couldn't get Carter Lines. And I've been thanking Carter ever since. There were approximately 20 high school teachers, had 3 weeks, met 4 hours a day. And I don't remember whether they took the course for credit and whether it was graduate credit or whether it was just renewal stuff. The fact that I don't remember is actually a good sign. And my plan was to try to give them a chance to wean themselves from lockstep in a textbook. That was my grand plan, okay? So here was my plan to implement the plan. I mean, if you've taught for at least 5 years, you've got all the calculus books you'll ever need, all right? So I made sure I didn't have them buy a book. I gave each of them a different book, okay? So that sends a message right there, or it was supposed to. And then I made my initial plans. I was going to do a week on approximation, a week on generalizing slope, and a week on generalizing area, the 3 big ideas in Calculus 1. And then trying to buy enough time so that at the end there'd be a day or 2 days or 3 days where I could get modeling to be their central idea about from where the applications will come. And I gave it in an IBL style. There's no way I wasn't going to do that. But I wanted to make sure that each day was built around their presentations where they were responding to what I had them talk about the previous day. So for 7 or 8 years after that workshop, I still had teachers that were calling me on a regular basis. Not about calculus, just about what was happening. That was a very, very good outcome in and of itself. But here is what I see as the best outcome of the workshop. And it had squat to do with calculus. Every day, every class period ended with them talking to each other about what they could have done in Algebra 2 or what they could have done in geometry or what they could have done in what they call that course, math analysis in Virginia, so that the things that they were working on now would have been clean. But what I really think they were saying was, ooh, here's what you need to know in order to be able to go for the, see, because at least if my perceptions were right after the fact, the calculus was a bunch of techniques rather than just 3 ideas that a bunch of techniques commented on. And, but that was a worthwhile workshop for algebra and geometry, whether it was any good for calculus or not. Bath County and Highland County, Bath County's entire tax base is the homestead resort, and Highland County has no tax base. They make a lot of maple sugar. Rural western Virginia, small school districts, and I had literally the entire faculties from the elementary and middle schools in those two, in this particular work. I had 2 entire semesters, 1 night a week, 3 hours, and with the goal, and it was funded with an Eisenhower grant for mathematics education. And I actually had an additional added luxury. I had 1 assistant superintendent, and I had an assistant principal who were in the course. So I had a chance to proselyte the persons to whom they answered to try to get some understanding at the next level that this is not a cut and dried thing, this measure with test scores. This is something that's about the children they teach. So, the plan, since I had taught, at that time we only had 2 semesters in the Math for Elementary School Teachers course. I was going to use my course, but I was going to adopt it to people who had already had some version of this course. But that was going to be the skeleton that I was going to try to build the interaction around. So that was the idea. And what I had hoped was that that would give me a way for them to talk about how they were going to take what they understood and translate it into teaching the children under their care. But at the same time, as I heard them deal with the mathematics, it would give me cues where I could actually bolster up their mathematics. That was my philosophical plan. Here's the plan to implement the plan. I would focus their class-to-class preparation for the course on what is the mathematics. Because the one thing that you don't do, even if you believe it, you do not patronize their mathematics. Their mathematics is what they have to work with. If you can find a way to enhance it, that's good. But you don't talk down to a fellow professional. Okay? So instead of, can you do this mathematics, change the focus to what is the mathematics. Because if they can learn to articulate, I walked in on the end of Lee, she was saying this definitions are the axioms for K through, or certainly for 9 through 12, but the experienced version of the definitions is the first principles in K through 5. You see, so what is the mathematics? And then where and what form does it show up in your curriculum? So that gave them the reality of, because they were just going to work with the new standards of learning in Virginia at the time. I split each class period into 3 parts. I mean, you got 3 hours. That's too long for anybody to sit in one place, even if you've got them actively involved. So there were 3 class periods each night with a break in between. Not necessarily the same length. You know, depending on what was happening was what got the most attention on a given night. So you had your follow-up from the previous class period. That's the active learning. the activity base there, discussion of connections of what and how they were teaching, and then the preparation for what we were going to do the next week and the problems that would try to make it real for them. And you see how this connects back into that at least theoretically makes a cycle. Okay? One of the most frightening things that's ever happened to me in my teaching career happened during this course, by the way. I had a 7th and 8th grade math science teacher from Highland County Middle School was taking this stuff directly from the classroom into her classes and reporting back the next week. Here's how it went, Ed. What should I be doing with Kelly instead? Or, by golly, you know, Susan's better than any one of us on this. Here's her answer to the problem you gave me. It was wonderful. She just latched on to it. And she had no mathematics. She went to one of these colleges where you make your own curriculum, and she was an ecology major. And boy, if it were that easy to get converts, we'd be in a lot better shape. Best outcome. They talked to each other, and I was able to commit extra time to what I perceived to be weak spots in some teachers' mathematical backgrounds. You see, when it shows up as a question that they ask, rather than it's something you impose upon them, then they don't even know they're learning. There's nothing to resent because it's theirs. And so that worked out. The one time in my life, what I planned to happen actually happened. The other thing is that it made me acutely aware of the fact that all standards of learning are not created equal. So in the second semester, when I was taking them fitting what they were doing, I would have as an introductory exercise, after we said, what is the mathematics? I'd have them go to the standards that covered whatever we were doing, pick out the standards, and then make that a focus of discussion, and we'd end up with a hierarchy at the end of that part of the class period. And John just now made the same point in his calculus talk. The stuff that's not really important but has to be covered, you use to teach the stuff that is important. So when you get this, not all standards of learning are created equal, the ones that are important, you use the other ones to teach. So you go through this and make sure they've seen it, but the way you make your exercises is so that that point shows up in teaching the big idea. And that is not something I had thought about before. Well, of course, I didn't even know what a standard of learning was either. I had spent the previous part of my career fighting behaviorism, and then trying to live with it was not something I was in a real catbird seat to pre-plan on, at least. Working with peers, I'm going to go out of mathematics. My second year in James Madison, I got control of day 3 of a week-long workshop funded by the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia to help James Madison plan an interdisciplinary freshman seminar. And then it was repeated. I don't remember whether we did it twice or 3 times that summer. But so there were either 80 or 120 faculty. And I was actually in the first group. So that's the context. But an important thing here, there was a wide diversity of disciplines represented. This was to be an interdisciplinary seminar, and they actually, Shell funded it so that they could pay the professors, and not having to invest but 1 week and getting maybe $500, we come cheap. But so it was well attended. Interestingly enough, this is one time more method actually worked for me. I had, I'll share this. At the end of my interview at James Madison, one of the senior members of the department, they actually wanted me because they thought I was a budding scholar. I had a better fastball than I did ability in mathematics. But took me aside and said, you know that more method can't work here. And my response was, well, we'll see. They hired me anyway, but the department knew from my interview. And that's how I was asked to lead day 3. They were looking for something that at least matched Socratic learning. And I never mentioned Moore method. I used the term Socratic in all the setups, but I was really trying to make a Moore method setup for interdisciplinary course. So the plan was to create opportunities for individual faculty to be spokespersons for their disciplines and to listen to why the perspectives of other disciplines might be worthy of consideration. Because we are a parochial bunch. I mean, everybody who's worked on a university campus knows that your department is the best. And then to create opportunities to begin thinking about topics, because you see, the seminar's not even, I mean, it's a concept, but it doesn't have any substance yet. And then to create opportunities to begin thinking about how the seminar format might create opportunities for the students to lead rather than to follow. That was me putting myself into it there. So there's the Moore aspect, okay? And I recruited a person from the business department who somebody told me about by rumor to do the last section of my day on case studies. That was the one place I knew in another discipline where something that looked like Moore method occurred. And that actually went very well. He did a nice job of that. So here's the plan to implement the plan. I broke down the large group into small groups in which no 2 individuals were housed in the same discipline. So I didn't care which 4 disciplines I had represented as long as no 2 of them were the same. And within the group, they paired off, and each faculty member explained to the partner what the standard of truth was in his or her discipline. And then let the other person introduce them to the small group, and then have each group introduce one of their members to the rest of the group as a whole. My idea was that they at least might begin to appreciate that a student might not being able to understand was a reasonable thing, because I knew that it would be garbage and garble. And I knew that the person that they were introducing would be shaking their head, no, 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 you didn't understand. And then it worked beautifully. They were talking to each other. They misunderstood what it took to get a paper in history, or what it took to get a paper in mathematics, or what it took to succeed in science, and it just became clear. And it was almost an angst as an entire group, but a positive angst. Because my point was, if we can't tell each other, why is a student supposed to hit the ground running? You've got to find a platform for them to experience what it is you want them to know, and you've got to be able to clearly delineate what this is right means, what logic does for us. Plus, I wasn't clear what the standard of truth was in fashion merchandising, for instance. You know, things like that, whether there's actually a clear academic goal. Okay? Then I had each subgroup pick a topic that all of their members felt was worthy of inclusion in the freshman seminar, and upon which one of the following 2 things had to be true. The discipline that he or she represented could comment on it, or they could make the case that the discipline that he or she represented shouldn't comment on it. I consider those equally good, by the way. Yeah. And then have each group report to the large group on the topic of their choice, and then summarize the contribution, which gave me a follow-up on the first exercise, because now they had some basis of comparison of why they thought the discipline could contribute and what the standard of truth, as it was at least articulated, had been for that discipline if they were paying attention. Okay? All right? And then I laid out Socratic possibilities for running seminars by putting them in a semi-seminar situation where the groups discussed the question and actually did, to the topic of my choice, what I'd asked them to do with the topic of their choice. And that was the day. Now, best outcome. Well, a freshman seminar, by the way, actually ran for 6 or 7 years until Dr. Carrier had milked all the money he could get out of it, and then they killed it. But here was the best outcome of the seminar, even though the purpose of the seminar eventually was fulfilled. But the best outcome was 40 persons got outside of their own department and knew people across campus. And the more we grew at James Madison, the more I treasured that, because when I needed to go somewhere else, practically every contact I had made had been during those 3 weeks in that summer. Because the bigger you get, the more you suck into your own business. And I think something like that ought to be done at every large university on a rotating basis at least every 5 years, so that you become one university rather than a collection of colleges. But that's just me talking. It probably was expensive. Now, a peripheral outcome that might interest you. My day of the seminar got chosen as the Dog and Pony Day. When Chef came by to see how their money was being spent, they brought them to my session. But the real neat thing was, I picked up an idea that I used for my seminar from Cleet Sellers' bunch. He was a biologist there. They called it Knowing About Knowing. And I turned it into, I've talked about the seminar that I gave on other places, but it still brings smiles to my face. Here's another interesting outcome. This is also where I learned why athletes know better than to speak to the press. After the seminar got running, I got a chance to work in faculty workshops. That was a good thing. But I also got interviewed multiple times by local media, where local, this particular one here was campus media. In the campus, here's a quote taken out of context and put in boldface underneath my picture. My seminar is unsuitable for the academically timid. Here's what I said. The seminar may seem unsuitable for the academically timid, but it actually has the capacity to allow academically timid students to become academically confident. I still think somebody was out to get me there. On the other hand, here is a quote that I'm still willing to own. Teaching the seminar is like teaching Sunday school without having God looking over your shoulder. Seeing students articulate their thoughts on serious issues of my choice, which they never recognized what the issue I had chosen was. I let them decide what the thing that the worked on. I love mathematics, and I love teaching mathematics, and I love the discovery associated with mathematics. But I had my seminal teaching experience in freshman seminar. The seminar was discussing something, and I had something I wanted to offer, and they told me, if we need your help, we'll ask for it. Now here's what I think the overall lesson for giving workshops is. Make the workshops about the participants by designing the bulk of the exercises so that the participants show you how you can enable them to identify and meet their own needs. That's all I got.